Seats. The conference is about to begin. Thank you very much. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, estimated guests and dear participants, it's a great pleasure for me to open this conference, which is actually the 6th high-level event organized by IEEP, together with our network of European think tanks since the establishment of the Think2030 platform. Think2030 brings together stakeholders from EU institutions, think tanks, as well as representatives from industry and civil society to discuss and produce evidence-based recommendations on key sustainability issues that we are facing today. As we all know, our current environmental challenges are massive, ranging from global warming to the extinction of species, with excessive consumption patterns threatening the livelihoods and survival of future generations. At the same time, the world has entered an age of multiple international conflicts, which are further complicating our efforts to reach a balance and to comply with the planetary boundaries. Unfortunately, these external crises are often used also as an excuse to defend some of the existing policies and to delay the revision of many unsustainable practices. Lately, they have also been used to water down and even to reject many crucial legislative acts related to the European Green Deal that in principle were supposed to be already approved by the member states. The purpose of our conference today is to discuss these challenges and to provide recommendations to future policymakers on how to navigate in these troubled times while maintaining the level of ambition that is needed to safeguard the sustainability, social cohesion, and prosperity of our societies. Before introducing our first topic, I want to extend my special thanks to the Belgian presidency, and especially to Minister Alain Maron and his cabinet, who have supported the preparatory work related to this conference since the very beginning. Their help has been instrumental as it has enabled us to organize this event under the auspices of the Belgian presidency. In addition, let me thank all the invited speakers, moderators, and participants for joining us today at this event. I look forward to your input in defining what kind of policy measures are needed to defend and to proceed with the implementation of the Green Deal. Finally, a few words about house rules. First of all, as you know, the event will be recorded and live streamed. We will also take some pictures, which may later be published on our channels. For participants both online and in person, you will have the chance to ask questions by using the Slido application, which you can access via a QR code, which is already on the screen there, or a link that will be shown throughout the conference. In addition, we will circulate microphones to those who would like to raise questions from the audience. As to the unlikely event that we would have an emergency situation, you can find indications to the emergency exits in each room where we are having our sessions. And finally, in that case, the contact person are anyone who have an organizer badge, basically all of the colleagues from IEEP. With these instructions, I hope you will all enjoy an interesting conference, and I look forward to a lively discussion. Next, I would like to invite and welcome Minister Alain Maron, who is responsible for climate change, environment, energy, and participatory democracy at the government of Brussels Capital Region, but who is also chairing the EU Environment Council meetings. Minister Maron will give his keynote speech on the role of environmental priorities during the Belgian presidency. Minister, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, thank you, Eero, for the welcoming words, and I would like to thank the Institute for European Environmental Policy for organizing such a timely conference. There is no time for a break or for a pause. From heat waves to floods and forest fires, Europe is already experiencing severe changes resulting from climate change. Those changes are affecting our ecosystems, people, and economy. Recent years have seen record-beating heat waves, and 2023 was the hottest year ever on record. The extreme heat waves of 22 alone were associated with around 60,000 excess deaths. This comes also at a price. Between the 80s and 22, weather and climate-related extremes caused economic losses of assets estimated at more or less 600 billion euros in the EU, of which more or less 52 billion euros in 22 and almost 60 billion euros in 21. It is in this context that the first European climate risk assessment was published earlier this month. It shows that Europe is the fastest warming continent in the world. Climate risks are threatening its energy and food security, ecosystems, infrastructure, water resources, financial stability, and people's health. According to the report, many of these risks have already reached critical levels and could become catastrophic without urgent and decisive action and concrete action. We also know that vulnerable social groups will be particularly affected by such crises. The imperative that the transition is to be just is at the heart of the European Green Deal. It is clearer than ever that the green transition will be just or there will be no transition. As the cost of inaction is enormous, the case for climate action is clear. And thus, there is no time for a break. We must continue to act now, and we have to amplify our actions. Let's take this opportunity to look back at the first half of our presidency. Our presidency, the Belgian presidency, came at a crucial moment in time, concluding major legislative files of the Green Deal, while shaping the EU's next strategic environmental and climate agenda for the upcoming decade. Last January, we officially kicked things off with the informal meeting of environment ministers here in Brussels. Belgian author and essayist David van Reebrouck kicked off the discussion, highlighting the crucial role of citizens and anchoring the current issues in concrete reality, particularly citing the devastating floods of summer 22 in Belgium. There can be no decarbonization without democratization, he said. And that's true. I think it's essential that we keep these words in mind as we continue our effort to achieve a just and green transition. They set the tone for the rest of the discussions with all member states, and they left me hopeful for the remainder of the presidency. It was positive to see a lot of convergence on important topics of the agenda. To give a few examples, on adaptation, the need to work together at all levels of governments and for more financing. We need money to do that. On the 2040 climate target, the consensus to have an ambitious target in line with the Paris Agreement and the importance of taking social justice into account in our way there. On just transition, the recognition of the transversal character of this challenge requiring a cross-sectorial approach. And on circular economy, the openness to reinforce a common framework for circular economy. Member States affirmed a good level of ambition in all these areas, despite a challenging context in which environmental and climate policies have come under a lot of pressure due to calls for a break or even a retreat. On the legislative side, we have managed to conclude 6 important files of the Green Deal that will enable to contribute to the European zero pollution objectives and reduce harm to citizens' health, protect our biodiversity, and fight against climate change by reducing CO2 emission. We are continuing the work on some legislative files, such as the Waste Framework Directive, which we discussed at the Council on Monday 2 days ago. In the meantime, it is time to prepare the ground for the future EU environment and climate policies, ensuring to pave the way for achieving our commitment to climate neutrality by 2050. In the last months, the Commission released 3 much-awaited publications on the 2040 climate target, on risk preparedness, and the midterm review of the 8th Environment Action Programme. These points were discussed by Member States at Monday Council meeting. Let me give you a brief overview of my key takeaways. On the future climate objectives, the EU is legally bound by and firmly committed to achieving climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest. As an intermediate goal towards 2050, the European Commission proposes a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in its recent communication. The constructive exchange of views on the Commission proposals and the recommendations made it clear that EU ministers recognize the importance of setting a milestone for 2040. That's a good point. To provide clarity and predictability for all decision makers, stakeholders, and investors, and to continue the European Union's global climate leadership in the run-up to the COP29 and the COP30. In response to the first EU climate risk assessment I just talked about, European Environmental Agency, the European Commission published its communication, Managing Climate Risk, Protecting People and Prosperity. The Commissioner Hoekstra presented at the ENVI Council. Alongside the necessary comprehensive action to reduce its emission and limit climate change, the EU must also better prepare for adapting and managing these growing climate risks. But as the UCRA shows, the EU and its member states are far from ready until now. The communication sets out how the EU can better anticipate risks and build greater climate resilience. It is a crucial step forward. Finally, with its report on the 8th Environment Action Programme midterm review, the Commission showed that objectives under the European Green Deal are attainable if the actions planned are fully implemented. It showed that climate change mitigation and adaptation are progressing, but faster progress is needed to meet EU's 2030 targets and net zero by 2050. It also sheds light on the importance and significant potential to shift to a circular economy, which is key to reverse such unsustainable trends, which is why we made it of the presidency's priorities. It is now up to the Council to provide a first response, and we are diligently engaged in this task. We will continue to work on this topic at working level and have more in-depth discussions during the next ENVI Council in the beginning of June, but after the elections. So rest assured, the Belgian presidency will continue to facilitate all these important discussions and keep up with the necessary pace, as we are convinced that the EU needs a whole-of-society approach to get people, workers, businesses, and regions on board of the green and just transitions towards a fair, resilient, and circular future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Maron, for your speech, and also for agreeing to stay with us a bit longer, as you have kindly accepted to be a speaker also at our high-level panel, which starts at 11 o'clock. Next, I'm honored to share with you a video message from Commissioner Virginijus Sinkevičius, who is the European Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. And after his intervention, I would ask our Research Director, Antoine Oger, to take the floor and to introduce the preliminary results of our latest survey on the Green Deal Barometer. But first, the video from the video message from Commissioner Sinkevičius.
Dear friends, 2024 is a pivotal year, the end of a Commission mandate, the end of a Parliament term, a time to look back at what we have achieved and a time forward at what remains to be done. With the European Green Deal, we took a huge step forward. We combined our battle against climate change with fresh push for circular green growth. We fought environmental degradation with a new effort to be inclusive and fair. We kicked off a systemic transition in line with the SDGs, and we brought science and policy together. There were great challenges, a pandemic, a Russia's war of aggression. But the deal held strong. It accelerated our energy transition. It strengthened our strategic autonomy, and it's starting to deliver sustainable competitiveness for long term, with action plans for zero pollution, circular economy, and biodiversity. We had the roadmaps we needed. The first phase is almost behind us, and as we now put the finishing touch to our transformative framework. And despite the geopolitics, despite the delicate economic situation, the Green Deal continues to deliver, with continuous progress on the legislative framework in the last few days. So what does lay ahead? It's time for a new focus on policy implementation. The midterm review of the 8th Environmental Action Programme showed significant progress on the ground. Greenhouse gas emissions are coming down, air quality is rising, and we are mobilizing finance for the green transition. There is room for hope, but Europe needs a far greater shift to sustainable production and consumption. That means implementing these recent initiatives in full, with no compromise in our efforts to reach the targets. Our 2030 targets for climate and environment are still within reach, provided we step up the financing. EU governance tools like the European semester, the EU competitiveness strategy, and the new economic governance framework have been redesigned with the implementation challenge in mind. Member states now have important tools to speed the transition, like the integrated national energy and climate plans. And by integrating actions for circular economy, they can accelerate the process even more. Public and private green investments have seen major increases, and that too must continue. Mobilizing finance will be crucial, and the next multi-annual financial framework will need to be carefully crafted. Must foreground the EU taxonomy with do no significant harm at its core, and the deal must leave no one behind. If we want public support, we must ensure a just transition with a fair distribution of the benefits and the costs. That will make collaboration and dialogue. And it will take many events like your conference today. The green transition can only happen with the people on board businesses, national, regional, local authorities, communities, and citizens, all working together to bring about change. That's the future we need to deliver. Thank you, and best wishes for the day.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes, seems like it. Thank you very much, first of all, for coming. My name is Antoine Oger. I'm the research director here at IEEP. I would like to thank once again Minister Maron and the Belgian presidency of the EU for welcoming us in this most important building, and for Commissioner Sinkevičius for reminding us of how crucial of a year 2024 is. This is a pivotal year, as you mentioned. And as Minister Maron also mentioned, there is not much time, there is no time actually for a break. We are now ending an election cycle, legislative cycle, and we're about to enter into a new one. And this is now a convenient time, a very, very important time for us to present the results of our Barometer, European Green Deal Barometer. This is a publication that we have been producing for the last 4 years. This is the 4th edition. It is an annual expert consultation assessing the progress of the Green Deal implementation. It is built with 11 survey partners from our Think Sustainable Europe network, many representatives of which are with us today, our Think2030 platform, and beyond. The idea, as I said, is to assess the overall implementation progress since the launch of the European Green Deal and to measure its resilience in the face of the 2024 EU elections. It is complemented by 5 national case studies covering deep diving into some member states, France, Czech Republic, and so on and so on. It is also complemented by a specific dive into the external dimension, with the impact and the influence of the European Green Deal on third countries, which is sometimes perhaps overlooked in the design of EU policies. But at the end of the day, it is a consultation of a bit over 300 experts interviewed with different backgrounds from academia, policymakers, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector. So, first things first, let's involve all of you. You have here a QR code in which you will be able to answer that question, the first question that we've asked all of our experts. In your view, will the 2024 EU elections have a positive, negative, or neutral impact, if any, on the implementation of the European Green Deal? We've asked that question to our 300 experts, and now we give you the chance to do so as well. So, by all means, by scanning this QR code, you should be able to answer that question. While the results come in, and thank you already, they're appearing right now, we have, I think, quite a very clear message or perception here today in the audience that unfortunately the 2024 EU elections may have a negative impact on the European Green Deal. I think this is rather clear from the results that you've all shared with us today. I must say that this is, unfortunately as well, perhaps extremely aligned with the answers from the experts that we have interviewed. As you can see, the numbers are rather similar. 67% foresee a negative impact of the EU elections on the European Green Deal. I want to insist that this is not a poll. This is a question posed to a number of experts, you included, experts as a perception of how the EU elections will unveil. Yet, current polls do indeed foresee a surge or an increase of conservative and climate-skeptic parties, while even for certain parties that did initially support the European Green Deal, do not put a significant emphasis on climate and environmental policies in their manifestos. So this has been a cause for concern. Similarly, the Green Deal agenda is expected to be narrowed and weakened, as you can see, again, with rather similar figures by the experts. So this is a sobering message. I think this is a message that you've heard in these past months, that the expectations of the EU elections for the climate and environmental agenda is a challenging one. So it seems that the experts, most experts do agree. But that being said, let's deep dive on the progress of the Green Deal policy areas, because there has been many progresses in the past years. On the most progress achieved, we find on the top innovation, energy, and smart mobility, followed by financing the transition, circular economy, and climate mitigation measures. And I think this is all something that we can recognize and commend the efforts of all parties involved into this progress that have been made in the past 5 years or so. Yet, on the issues that the perception is that there's been the least progress, and this is where we should arguably focus our efforts moving forward, we find fair and sustainable food and farming system. I don't need to tell you how challenging time it is for such policies at the moment. Ensuring a socially just transition. Minister Maron made clear how important that is moving forward. And biodiversity-related issues. Again, for all of those of us involved into policy making at the moment, there is a little thing called the nature restoration law that has been a challenging one as well, to say the least. So these give us an idea of the issues on which there's been the perception of the most progress and least progress in the past years. Now, there is a lot of text in that slide, so I'll talk slowly so you have the time to read it a bit, but it essentially dives further in these challenging questions and issues that I've just mentioned, the one on which there's been a perceived least progress. On ensuring a socially just transition, for instance, the experts we've interviewed feel very strongly that the European Green Deal objectives are compatible with a just transition. This is not a question of competing objectives or priorities. It is a question of designing and implementing European Green Deal policies in such a way that the most vulnerable population and communities are supported through the transition. Again, this is not incompatible. In terms of biodiversity, our survey rests, I'm afraid, very much on the capacity for EU institutions to adopt the nature restoration law, but which is deemed to potentially have a moderate to full impact by over 2/3 of experts. So this is a potentially game-changing legislation we're talking with. Yeah. Regarding, last but certainly not least, the fair and sustainable food and farming system, it's deemed as potentially the most challenged areas in terms of progress made. And again, in terms of not competing objectives, increasing the financial support for farmers to transition towards sustainable agricultural practices is seen by the majority of experts as the most necessary measure to achieve that environmental and climate-friendly EU agricultural policy. And I think this is a message that has resonated a lot in the streets of Brussels and in the streets of European capital and many European cities in the past few weeks and months. So, once we've reviewed this past priorities, policies, legislation, this also gives us a bit of a more of a hopeful message to it. Despite the fact that there is a perception that the European Green Deal will be challenged or might be challenged by the next election, experts feel that there is a certain degree of resilience. Legislations that have been adopted are here to stay. Many other legislation are still in the pipeline and are hopefully likely to be adopted. There might be new ones, and there will be new ones coming in the coming years. There is a degree of resilience of the European Green Deal, no matter the election result. So who should be involved? Who are the crucial actors, again, according to the experts, to the sustainability experts, into this, moving forward. We have the large-scale businesses. We're not going to make it without the private sector on board. They are the one driving change to a large extent. They are the one implementing the industrial innovation, production policies, and so on. So they need to be on board. They need to be drivers of change. National parliaments, member states, there's been a lot of discussions on the fact that the EU institutions these past 5 years have designed and adopted EU Green Deal legislation, and now is the time for implementation. That puts the member states on the front line. And that, as we will see later on, this is, of course, a challenge. European citizen. Mr. Maron is also Minister of Participative Democracy. The involvement of citizens is absolutely crucial if we want to have a coherent, a consistent message and some buy-in by the population into this environmental and climate policies and legislation. So I really wanted to focus on these particular actors and stakeholders. In terms of EU institutions, the European Commission is still on the front line. They are the one proposing the legislation, they are the one participating to the trilogue, they are the one at the heart, at the beginning of the process. The European Commission is the most important actor, according to the experts, on moving forward. Of course, European Parliament and European Council follow suit quite closely. This is, I think, a very good representation of how the EU institutions work, actually. So it's good to have a confirmation once in a while. So, again, involving you, the audience. You here are a list of thematic areas. You have a QR code on the top left. Which of the following thematic areas of the European Green Deal should be the top priority of the European Commission and the EU institutions after 2024? Please, we're asking you right now. Circular economy, external impact of the Green Deal, sustainable food and farm systems, zero pollution, ensuring a just transition, supplying decarbonized energy, biodiversity and ecosystems, financing the transition, climate mitigation, smart mobility, and innovation, research and innovation. Please, take a moment. Let us know which of these thematic areas you feel should be prioritized moving forward. So, let's see the first results coming in. I guess this is not entirely surprising. It's very high on the agenda. Thank you for the confirmation. Sustainable food and farm systems. Potentially the most challenging one, potentially the most important one for climate mitigation and climate adaptation moving forward. There is a dedicated session today on this topic, and of course, there is a lot to be said. Ensuring a just transition, I've just talked about it, and biodiversity and ecosystems. I see here also that the Belgian presidency has done a good job. I mean, identifying some of these priorities at their own core priorities, core pillar. We have the just transition here. We have the circular economy here. We have, of course, resource management, which also has a thematic session, and I'm sure there will be some lively debate. But thank you for participating and highlighting these three particular issues, because they are the ones almost that are agreed upon by the experts. Socially fair transition is on top. Fair and sustainable food and farming system comes second. So the top two is the same. Then we have the energy actually coming in. That's something that experts have mentioned, and it makes sense. I mean, this is one of the sectors on which there's been the most progress in the last 5 years, energy, climate mitigation. There's been arguably a very good progress on the matter. So it makes sense that it's high on the agenda to keep pushing, to keep the efforts going. And of course, the 2040 climate target, which is likely to come up next year, again, as a piece of legislation, is an integral part of that. And then biodiversity comes in right after climate mitigation that I've just mentioned. So this shows that there's a degree of common understanding of where we are, what we're facing, what's the next priorities moving forward. So I think the message here is loud and clear. So, how confident are we that we will keep pushing, that we will keep making efforts, keep making legislation for climate adaptation, mitigation, and the European Green Deal in general? This is rather good level. I wish it were higher, of course, but still, majority of experts are confident that the Green Deal will actually keep being a reality and a priority for the next EU institutions. So, again, a positive message. The main priorities and the main opportunities, priorities we've just covered. The main opportunity resonates to the message that I've been saying. We have climate mitigation and adaptation on top of the line. This is also resonates on the fact that we have made progress in the past few years, and we can keep making progress. There is already the baseline. Now we need to keep pushing. So it is clearly an identified opportunity. Low carbon, circular and resilient supply chains, of course, with all of the circular economy action plan packages and so on. Very high on the opportunity aspects. And then we need the money. Mr. Maron mentioned it, whether it's public, whether it's private, this transition will require a significant amount of funds. So this is, of course, an opportunity to engage all actors concerned, whether citizens, whether businesses we've mentioned, whether member states into this, into the transition. On that last note, thank you so much for your attention. I hope it gave you a very good idea of where we stand and what comes next. But I think the message here is loud and clear. I like the fact that there's been some alignment between the room and the experts we have interviewed in the past. Thank you so much for confirming our message. There is a summary of the barometer in the tote bag that you've received that was into your seat. So, of course, please take some time to review these results and come to us, IEEP members, if you have any questions. Without further ado, I would like now to welcome on stage our moderator for our first panel session of the day, Mrs. Alice Hancock, who is the EU correspondent at the Financial Times, and I will let you the chance to introduce our marvelous speakers for this first session.
Thanks so much, Antoine.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. Additional welcome from me. My name's Alice, as Antoine said. I cover energy, climate, environment, and agricultural policy for the FT in Brussels. And I'm delighted to welcome to the stage a very erudite lineup to join me. We obviously have Minister Maron, who we've heard from already this morning. Do come and take a seat. Saskia Brickmont, she's an MEP for the Greens in the Parliament. Thanks, Saskia. Lina Yrjö-Mononen, she's Executive Director of the European Environment Agency, whose reports have already been mentioned this morning. Veronika Hans-Savrankova, who is the Executive Director of the, UNEP, head of Brussels office, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself there. And Janis Potocnik, who's co-chair of the International Resource Panel. Do come and join me on stage. Now, we've heard some sobering analysis, some very interesting analysis. I think some really fascinating findings in the Green Deal Barometer there. I'm going to invite now my panelists to make a short intervention each to sort of set the scene for us. And I think the idea of this panel is to set the scene for the rest of the day and all the conversations that you'll be having later on. And so each one by one, I'm going to ask you to sort of respond to the key question of how we ensure the continuity and resilience of the EU Green Deal. So just sort of 5-6 minutes. I think everyone was invited to go up to the lectern. Lina, would you like to start?
Thank you. So good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting and timely event. I had some slides. I don't know whether they can be put on the screen. Thank you. So one can safely say that, there are no quick fixes for our sustainability challenges, and we can remember that, the UN Environment Conference held in Stockholm was already in 1972. And since then, the science message has been very clear that we need to take action to limit the impacts on environment and climate. And one can say that the progress has been rather slow, 50 plus years. For the last 30 years, our agency, the European Environment Agency, has been working at the European level to collect and assess scientific knowledge to inform the policymakers. One important thing that we have come to know over all these years is that the environmental crises are truly systemic. This means that climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and of course the underlying resource overuse issues are really interlinked and can only be tackled simultaneously by a systemic approach that seeks to reconfigure our key systems, energy, food, mobility, industrial systems, to make them sustainable. And while the UN Sustainable Development Goals recognize this, I believe that the European Green Deal has been the first political agenda and legislative framework to truly incorporate this thinking with parallel but interlinked goals governing climate, biodiversity, circular economy, pollution, agriculture, social justice, finance and industry. It has been a bold roadmap for transformative change, one can say so, but it is also important to recognize that we are still at the very beginning of our collective journey towards real sustainability. In the European Environment Agency, we have recently published two flagship reports which illustrate this fact. The first one is the EU's 8th Environment Action Programme Monitoring Report. The 8th Environment Action Programme guides the European environmental policy towards 2030, and our indicator report published in December, the first of its kind, shows that we are still a long way to go if we are to meet our 2030 targets. You can see here the indicators, 28 headline indicators, grouped to reflect the 2030 priority objectives: climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, regenerative circular economy, zero pollution, production and consumption impacts, and then the 8 EAP enabling conditions. And without going into any deep details, these, which funnily show, in my eyes, blue, but luckily on the screen there, they have the correct colors. The dark green means, bluish dark green, means that it is very likely that the target will be met by 2030, whereas the dark red means that it is very unlikely. And the light green and orange come in the middle. For instance, if you look at the environment and climate pressures related to EU production and consumption, you can see that none of these targets are currently likely to be met. And overall, the progress is it doesn't look very optimistic. We have also recently published the, indeed already mentioned, European Climate Risk Assessment, EUCRA, the first of its kind, comprehensive assessment of current and future climate risks, which shows that urgent action is really needed in a range of areas if we are to protect our societies from the costly and even devastating impacts of climate change and extreme weather that we are already seeing and starting to see here in Europe. In EUCRA, we identify a total of 36 major climate risks for Europe with the potential for severe consequences. They are grouped into 5 broad clusters: ecosystems, food, health, infrastructure, and economy and finance. And each of these risks alone has the potential to cause significant environmental degradation, economic damage, social emergencies, and political turbulence. And their combined effects, of course, are even more serious. And almost all these selected major risks may reach critical or even catastrophic levels during this century. And as you can see from the graphic, 21 of the 36 risks identified need more action now, with 8 of them being particularly urgent. And this means that policies need to increase in ambition, in scope, and in implementation. So the question is really, what will be the future of the European Green Deal, and how can we keep it high on the political agenda? To me, of course, one can say that Green Deal is here to stay in one or the other form. Many of the adopted proposals, and there's hopefully still some coming up during the Belgian presidency, they will move to the implementation stage. So we have the direction of travel, we have targets, and many national and subnational political and investment agendas already reflect the Green Deal's ambitions. We also know that with the European elections and with the changing geopolitical, economic and social contexts, there may come change in language or narrative and focus. Discussions around resilience, fairness, competitiveness, security and defense, and possibly EU enlargement are likely all to play a increasing role in the environmental debate and discourse. So our challenge is to showcase how addressing sustainability, climate and environmental challenges in a smart way can simultaneously address parallel concerns, contributing to the EU's competitiveness, security and strategic autonomy, while helping also to build a fairer society and a stronger democracy. This will definitely require systemic approaches, new governance models and tools, and better ways of engaging with people and sectors about their future. So how do we ensure that the resilience of the European Green Deal's objectives stays? It begins with, a steadfast commitment for collaboration and partnership, and the challenges we face, as they are so complex and interconnected, transcending national borders and sectors, we need cooperation. So we must forge alliances across governance and governments, businesses, civil society and academia. And this is very much also what is going on here today, bringing together different stakeholders and different partners to realize the ongoing ambitions of structural and systemic change envisaged in the European Green Deal, while recognizing also that the changing economic and socio-political context of our times. So I hope that today's debate is going also to bring some new tools for us to frame the debate for the next months and years. Very much looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lena. Thank you. Lots of good calls to action for the long term and for today, indeed. Veronica, would you like to?
Mr. Minister, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure for me to be here, and I would like to also echo the many thanks to the Institute for organizing this event, which is coming in a very critical moment. We have heard it already from the previous speakers, but I will repeat it. We are facing impacts of the triple planetary crisis, climate change, nature loss, and pollution. They are very present on all continents. We heard and we see the impacts in Europe in everyday life, the heat-intensive storms, air pollution, more globally polluted oceans, and the list goes on. These impacts fall hardest upon the poorest and the most vulnerable ones. These crises are very much interconnected and self-inflicting. To give example, mitigating climate change and reducing pollution address two of the most serious threats to biodiversity. Conserving natural habitats is a powerful way to sequester carbon and filter pollution. On the other hand, reducing pollution protects biodiversity and supports resilience. So we have hand-in-hand crisis and solutions coming together. Now, when it comes to the global environmental agenda, the impetus from the EU into environmental materialism has been impressive over the last few years. Very much EU leading on the global environmental agenda. Of course, driven very much by the European Green Deal with the domestic agenda, reform agenda, but also through EU's green diplomacy and EU's external financial instruments. I would very briefly recall the instrument role of the EU in the international meetings, the recent COP achievements, finalizing the global biodiversity framework, the inception and negotiations of the new legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, and so on and so forth. However, it was mentioned very strongly, and we see it very strongly outside, we are at the crossroads, or rather a turning point. On one hand, we are seeing the effects and impacts of the triple planetary crisis on the depletion of our planet. We feel it increasingly so, and so the pressure on our socio-economic models. At the same time, we see more and more resistance to environmental action in many countries in the world, including in the European Union. Another turning point is that while the EU engages in a transition of its political leadership, and the upcoming elections were mentioned, this year, 2024, will be significant also on the global agenda. We will have various high-level processes and meetings, the very debated climate COP29 in Azerbaijan, but also biodiversity COP16 in Colombia, the desertification COP16, finalization of negotiations on the legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, and we go on. All these key moments on international level are not anymore fora that the world, and particularly the EU, will be expected to express commitments, new commitments at the negotiating table. This time has passed. Now will be the time for the international community, and the EU in particular, to showcase that the countries are actually engaged in practical solutions, that we deliver on the promises, that we deliver on the implementation. Internationally, but also domestically. And also show that we mean the commitments that we have done collectively seriously, whether it's climate, biodiversity, or pollution targets. There are challenges. It's not coming easy. But these challenges that we are experiencing today, they can be turned into opportunities. And there is a way forward. Where the way forward lies, and I think we can talk about the European Green Deal, the future of the Green Deal, but also developments on the global level. Broader look into the socio-economic realities of environmental policies in line with the Agenda 2030. Sustainable Development Goals and 2030 Agenda, as was mentioned by the Executive Director of EEA, is agenda of justice and equality, of inclusive sustainable development and human rights and dignity for all. It requires fundamental changes to the way the global economy is organized. We need to change narrative away from environmental action, not only for the sake of environmental action, but to adopt a broader perspective that speaks to everyone. For example, our collective economic and social well-being depends on nature and its services. Yet we keep destroying nature. We know that more than 50% of the world's GDP is derived from nature. Yet our demand for resources continues to increase. Material use has increased more than 3 times over the last 50 years. It is very much present in the global resource outlook, which Janez will be, I'm sure, talking about in depth. 2 key messages I would like to pass on for the future. So first, we can achieve a lot by adopting a social lens to environmental action. For the new Green Deal, or continuation of the Green Deal, could we go a step further and create better hooks with EU social policies? It's good to see reflections ongoing on the just transition within the EU, and I would like to congratulate the Belgian presidency to have this at the very heart of the Belgian priorities, including the high-level conference on just transition just a couple of weeks ago. Human rights. I would really like to highlight the human right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, which is a roadmap for transformative change. A roadmap for preventing and remediating the harms caused by the triple planetary crisis. The right to clean air, water, adequate and nutritious food, non-toxic environment. This is basic human right. Also, we need to explore all the potentials in the area of employment, of skills and education, for instance. Educational institutions play a very key role in this. Talking of education, example here is also a very good example how young children, or not only children, can see the direct benefits of environmental protection. So we're just across this corridor here. In terms of employment, I would borrow the words from International Labour Organization that together with IUCN and UNEP estimated that 75 million people could work in nature-based solutions, which could be added by 20 million more if there are right investments in nature. Implementation of Paris Agreement could generate 24 million jobs by 2030 globally. Translating it into Europe, it would be 2 million additional jobs in Europe. But of course, it depends on how the policies are coordinated. If we don't set it right, of course, some jobs can be lost. Next area I wanted to mention is health. Both in policy making and practice, the links between health systems, climate, declining health of ecosystems, health of agriculture, health of agri-food systems is vital. There are four international organizations that are working under the One Health initiative, including UNEP, to steer action and investment in preventive action to secure healthy planet, health for people, but also health for agriculture and animals. There is no such thing as healthy people without healthy planet. We can also, the second message, and I will be coming to an end, I promise, is onboarding all sectors of our economies, from industries to financial institutions, but also the agriculture sector, through circular economy and behavioral change. We need to make a better case for the economic transition and change the way how we measure economic prosperity beyond GDP, as it does not reflect the challenges that we are facing today. There is progress and very interesting reflections in the area of sectoral pathways, transport, buildings, energy sector. It was actually very visible in the barometer that we just saw. In land and food sectors, we need to find solutions to overcome the deadlock between sustainability and production and consumption. In my view, there is no conflict there. We need to find positive cases, how it really works in practice. One other thing I would mention, which is lagging behind, and that's the pollution agenda that should be part of the whole package addressing the triple planetary crisis, working very closely across all three legs of the crisis. Last but not least, I would also remind the UN Secretary General's 6 key transitions that if we address them and if we deliver for all people in our societies, there really can be difference. These are food systems, energy, digital connectivity, education, jobs, and social protection, and the triple planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And finally, the last point, and very much I think colleagues will agree, here is the science that needs to be at the very heart of the decision making, with the policy making, whether it's science, research, innovation to promote implementing long-term ambitions for sustainable development, but also science as a cornerstone for understanding our environment and fundamental instrument in providing answers to sustainability challenges. Data-driven foresight can help us to anticipate and answer critical questions, will help us to prepare better for the potential future challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, The continuous leadership from the European Union is fundamental to demonstrate that there is a way forward, that we have positive cases, that the Green Deal does work, we need to implement, and it can solve environmental but also other crises hand in hand. Without making choices between environmental protection, growth, and prosperity. They are connected. It is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is Agenda 2030. And thank you again for organizing this conference at this very, very important moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Veronica. Yannis, I think she set you up nicely there.
I have to put them down because I'm getting old. Hi, friends. Warm welcome will be unfortunately welcoming, which we'll be using in the future more and more. Mm-hmm. The world in which we are living is far from the future we want. We are facing multiple crises at multiple levels. Acute crises are exposing our deep fragility. Chronic crises are exposing our inability to deal with them. Taking painkillers to fix the acute crisis will not heal chronic crises and solve systemic challenges, rather hide them and make them worse. It seems that our key challenge is how to shift from an economic system based on the notion of unlimited growth to the one which is both ecologically sustainable and socially just. No, growth is not an answer. Growth is central characteristic of our life. A society, an economy that does not grow will die sooner or later. Growth in nature, however, it's not linear nor unlimited. While certain parts of organisms or ecosystems grow, others decline, releasing and recycling their components, which become resources for the new growth. It appears that the linear view of economic development, as used by most mainstream and corporate economists and politicians, corresponds to the narrow, quantitative concept of economic growth, while the biological and ecological sense of development corresponds to the notion of qualitative growth, to the well-being. Recent mathematical models demonstrated that in market economies, the natural inclination of wealth is to flow upward, and that only redistribution can or could set limits on inequality. The Club of Rome, I'm also the member of that, Earth for All projects that left unchecked. Rising global inequality in the next 50 years will lead to increasingly dysfunctional societies. According to the authors, we will see negative social tipping points before severe environmental tipping points. Equity and poverty alleviation is key if we want people to be concerned about regenerative economics and decarbonization. According to the latest scientific findings, we are already crossing 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries, which is obviously pushing us out of the safe operating space in which our societies have evolved. In a scientific work recently published, authors of the Behavior Crisis Driving Ecological Overshoot claim that, I'm quoting, climate breakdown is a symptom of ecological overshoot, which in turn is caused by the deliberate exploitation of human behavior. We need to become mindful of the way we are being manipulated. The material footprint is dangerously under-discussed. Most climate solutions proposed so far only tackle symptoms rather than the root causes of the crisis. This, they say, leads to increasing levels of free levers of overshoot, consumption, waste, and population. Where discussion of climate often centers on carbon emissions, a focus on overshoot highlights the material usage, waste output, and growth of human society, all of which affect the Earth biosphere. In short, the main problem in our growing societies are consumption and production patterns designed by industrialized world, which are wasteful and unjust. If we do not change them, we will face increasingly severe environmental impacts while not having even basic human needs met by many. IRP has recently released Global Resource Outlook 2024. What is a major novelty? We are simply setting the order right. Economy was invented to serve humans and not the opposite. So we are looking at how to optimize provisioning systems, human needs, rather than maximizing the output of individual sectors. We acknowledge the usefulness of GDP, but we should be guided by well-being. We propose to focus on most resource-intensive provisioning systems, built environment, mobility, food and energy, which represent 90% of global material demand. That's everything extracted from the earth. Focusing on human needs could allow and incentivize cross-sector innovation and shifts to a more future-fit business models. So the core question is actually how to meet our needs with less energy and less resources. Policy attention should be given to some currently present blind spots in policymaking. First, we need a more holistic system change approach. Silo logic and the lack of capacity or knowledge how to translate system change visions into concrete policies and investments results in conflicting actions and policies that actually hinder the real transformation. Second, more attention should be given to the roots of the problems, addressing the fundamental drivers and pressures. We lack focus on natural resource use, as well as on market signals leading consumers and producers' behavior. And third, policy attention, also in climate efforts, it's mainly given to the supply side of the economy, to the cleaning of the existing wrong economic system, which will not make the wrong system right. Efficiency should be complemented with sufficiency policies. This would offer additional needed and powerful solutions in transformational efforts, as well as better address the equity-related challenges. In short, if we want to avoid extinction of elephants in the nature, we have to first extinct elephants in our rooms. On conceptual level, some major challenges are necessary. From humans in function of economic success and development to an economy in function of delivering human needs, setting the order right. From an economy considering humans as external and superior to nature, to an economy acknowledging that we are embedded with nature. Destroying nature, it's basically destroying ourselves. From an extraction-based production to a creation-based production, we should stop stimulating extraction-based economic success and reward responsible, innovative, creative ways of meeting our needs. And last, from an egoistic, short-term based interest governance structures and logic to cooperation and sharing sovereignty. Don't believe your leaders which will tell you that they will protect national sovereignty because they are cheating you. We must improve our collective resilience. We have to cooperate. There is no other way in this interconnected world. Dear friends, we are in a year of multiple elections, and this year we will also get a new European Commission. The question, to continue or not with the policy designed by European Green Deal, is simply the wrong question to ask. We should rather consider where it needs to be strengthened, deepened, and what is needed to make it better implementable. Equity and poverty alleviation are key if we want people to be basically looking into environmental questions. Social and environmental efforts must go hand in hand and clearly deserve more attention. We need a fundamental systemic societal shift in how we use resources, away from wasteful linear production and consumption systems towards circular, resource-efficient societies, optimizing well-being for all. The European and global geopolitical reality is changing indeed, also with the war going in our neighborhood and increased security threats. We cannot ignore that, but we should also not interpret it in a wrong, narrow way. These are some of the questions behind the future of European Green Deal and the future of European Union after elections, by the way, also behind the future of the world. Access to and use of natural resources have been in human history always closely related to the level of well-being achieved by nations. Also, unfortunately, to stability, security, conflicts. The whole history of colonialization of nature is central to fairness and equity. Ultimately, changing human relationship with the rest of nature, it's not only environmental, but also economic, equity, security, stability, imperative to strengthen collective resilience. This relationship is not stable nor balanced, and it will be resolved either with immediate collective wisdom and cooperation or in a hard and painful way, including instability, conflicts, wars, pandemics, severe weather events, the world of chaos and migrations. Unfortunately, there is no other way. Do we really need to face all these developments even more seriously, as we already are, to understand that it would be really good if we would at least try to avoiding them? We are indebting future generations financially and by depleting the nature, which is simply wrong. Apparently, we humans are most intelligent species on the planet, and it's high time to prove it. More than an economic or technological choice, this is a moral choice. Youth, it's our hope. The best proof is the structure of the room at which I'm looking currently. Your perspective is longer term. You have better knowledge and awareness. You are less ownership biased than my generation. And frankly, you have no other choice because we have put you in that situation. The future will be green, or there will be no future. Thank you.
Thanks, Yanis. Some sobering thoughts there. Saskia, absolutely, last but not least, please.
Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you very much to the previous speakers. And I have to say that most of my speaking notes were fully aligned on what you've been saying. So I will try to focus on a more parliamentary perspective, as I am an MEP. I've been running for 5 years now, so I can testify very much of what has been happening those 5 last years inside the European Parliament and in our work with the European Commission and the member states, of course. And first, let me thank you for this very key and, yes, accurate conversation today ahead of the European elections and when we are facing a complete U-turn, a U-turn in green policies. You remember very well 5 years ago that we broadly voted, vast majority, the climate emergency. In the Parliament, it led to this green wave in 2019, leading to the Green Deal, which was a completely, I would say, revolution compared to the previous European Commissions. It has been said, I will not come back on all the achievements of the Green Deal, but we have consolidated, for instance, the European climate law, which is key in really enforcing our climate objectives also at national level. And then, I will not remake the history of the last 5 years, COVID, war, but I would say 1 year ago, we started facing mainly EPP challenging our environmental regulations for mainly political reasons. Challenging also this baby from von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, the Green Deal. This is also for completely internal political reasons to the EPP, which remains the first group in the European Parliament. So questioning the nature restoration law. And we're still not there yet, because the Belgian presidency, mainly my colleague Alain Maron, is now fighting in order to get this majority in the Council when institutionally wise, we should not discuss further on this law, but finally adopt it. Recently, we've seen the Commission's answer to the farmers' protests only focused on simplifying the common agricultural policy and withdraw or weakening the environmental measures of the CAP. This is the only answer given to the farmers that are, again, in the streets saying that the main concerns are related to the prices. The main concerns are related to a question of competitiveness also with the rest of the world, and questioning, actually, as Yanis just said, the fundamental economic paradigm of our agricultural policies and also trade policies. Step back on pesticides, step back on the revision of the REACH regulation, and also the rescue operation on the CSDD directive, for instance, are other examples of the recent challenges we are facing. We didn't have to wait for the elections and for the new coming majority to see this backlash and the actual call for a regulatory pause in environmental legislation, when all the indicators, and the previous speakers have highlighted it, all the indicators are showing that we have to even further push and be more ambitious when it comes to environmental legislation. The sense of urgency that we felt 5 years ago should be at heart of this campaign. Even experts are pessimistic about it. Let's reverse this tendency. Let's all together convince each and everyone, your neighbors, your family, your friends, that people have to vote first, of course, but also to vote for the Green Deal. It's a question of our future, the habitability of our planet, and indeed, we owe it to our children. We owe it to our children, and we also have to do it in order not to succumb collectively to eco-anxiety. I know in this room we are all like-minded, and this is also one of the fights we have to lead. It has been already said quite extensively. I think we have to bring back the SDGs at the heart of the European policies, and also make our European policies coherent and aligned on the SDGs. Each commissioner has had in its portfolio the achievement of the SDGs, and we're not there yet. On the contrary, we see that half of the 140 targets will not be met, that 30% of the SDGs are, on the contrary, regressing. And this is also something we have to bring back at core of our policies. I hear experts, and it has been said today also, that the next mandate will be mainly about implementing the existing regulations, directive laws, and indeed, it will be one of the challenges. But again, we know that we have to be more ambitious and to adopt further legislations. I've mentioned some of those that are currently stuck. We know that the nature restoration law, if it is adopted, is still too weak, right? We will have to strengthen those regulations even more. And this is all about the alliances we'll be able to build. Bring in civil society, work with all stakeholders, work with progressive MEPs, because yes, there are still progressive MEPs, and I want to believe that there will be progressive MEPs in the next European Parliament. Yes, we will have to have a strong parliamentary scrutiny when it comes to the implementation of the adopted regulations, such as the CSDDD, but also the deforestation or anti-deforestation regulation that will be evaluated in 25-26. So we will have to be there to be active in order to even further improve it. The CBRM will be fully applied from 26. The Social Climate Fund will kick in 2026. And we know, and I fully agree with that the next challenge is to make the Green Deal social. Social Climate Fund is a good step. It's a step in the right direction, but we know we'll have to even enhance and augment the budget allocated to social policies. And this brings me to another point that has been mentioned in the Barometer as well, is the question of financing the transition. Financing the green transition, the social transition, and this will be in the focus of the next parliamentary session. Please be there also to convince the supposed to be progressive MEPs, and here I focus on the socialists, because many of them are ready in April to vote for austerity, for the economic governance measures that will again avoid member states and the EU to truly and fundamentally invest in the green transition. Only for Belgium, if we vote those measures, it will represent 27 million that we will have to save just in order to answer the regulatory measures. This means that we will cut again in public services, and that the main investments that we have in every member state to invest in the green transition and the social transition in order to isolate houses, in order to invest massively in public transports, all social-related measures will certainly suffer. But we all know that if we want citizens on board, these are the measures that we have to develop also in the coming years. It has been mentioned, so I will not come back extensively on that, but aligned with the more ambitious social part of the Green Deal, we also have to have another international approach and coherence with the European Green Deal. It's, for instance, related to the very accurate question of mirror clauses in our trade agreements, for instance, but also related to our own green transition, the question of the access and exploitation of minerals. Today, we already face social and environmental challenges, and I fear that the EU is not on the right path when it comes to even more concluding new agreements with so-called partners. But in order to access their minerals, I also think about the recent memorandum of understanding that are signed with several countries, including Rwanda. All examples of deals where the parliament has no say. There's absolutely no democratic, no parliamentary scrutiny on those agreements, and this is something that we are strongly opposing. So yes, I think we all have the solutions in our hands. We have them. Let's just put people and nature first. Let's put people before profit. Let's push further for this paradigm change that Yannis has been calling for. All the solutions have been listed in the Barometer as well. fighting for a new model based on circular economy. We also have a Secretary of State to the economic transition here in Brussels, Barbara Tracht, and she's being very active in order to make the Brussels economy circular. So this paradigm change is possible. It's all a question of political will and of strong alliances with civil society and, of course, with the citizens. So again, strong call to each and every one of you to convince the people towards the elections of the 9th of June. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all so much. I think lots to chew on there. I'm not sure how optimistic I feel after it, but I'm going to take heart from the IEEP's finding that the experts are confident that we can find a way forward. Now, I think one of the buzzwords that really came up for me when I was covering the Environment Council, which you chaired, Minister, on Monday, was social acceptance. And we've heard, I think everyone has mentioned just transition here. I mean, Minister, maybe you could kick us off. What needs to be done to get citizens on board with the priorities of the Green Deal in the next mandate? I mean, it's fine for us to talk here, but what should we be saying to everyone else out there?
We really need a positive narrative about all of that. And it's difficult to build, but it's possible. Possible to make the people mainly understand the link between the environment and the health. And if we tackle environmental problems, we will tackle health problems. Otherwise, it will be the opposite. And from time to time, it's quite easy to explain. For instance, here in Brussels, because I'm a minister of the Brussels region, we have a strong low emission zone. We have banned thousands and thousands of vehicles. Euro 5 diesel are banned in Brussels. And in some months, that will be the Euro 5. There is almost no protest. Almost no protest. That runs well, in fact. How is it possible? So we'll see in the future, but at this time, it's okay. We have invested a lot in alternative. We have to have a concrete right to mobility to the people. That's important. And we have communicated a lot on that. And we have communicated also about the health problem linked with the air quality, included with citizen participation and citizen science. For instance, with a big campaign about air quality, with thousands of citizens measuring the air quality with a kit, a special kit, on their street. Even the king or the famous people has participated to this campaign. And we had also the support of big medias, Le Soir and The Standard, big medias, big newspapers in Belgium. So we tried to create a narrative around this decision. And I think we have to do the same on each environmental and climate decision. The people, they need solutions, so we have to help and to provide solutions, concrete solutions. We have to communicate a lot, and we have to leave the opportunity to the people, to the companies, to the businesses, to the NGOs to participate in the solution.
Thanks. I think coming from London, where there's been sort of quite outrage at the low emission zone, it's amazing to hear about no protests. Lena, from where you sit, is there enough, I mean, the Minister outlined some of the communication they're doing. Is there enough communication about Green Deal priorities in other member states, and how do you see that from where you sit?
First of all, it was a great example of how, indeed, I mean, environmental and health topics, linking them speaks to the citizens and can activate them also via the citizen science project. So great great achievements there. And all in all, the energy transition, also, I mean, the heating systems in the households, how, of course, money is also needed, but what kind of co-benefits there can be for the citizens when air suddenly is cleaner, when they get rid of burning coal or wood in their ovens. Whether the European citizens, all in all, have been enough, let's say, informed about the European Green Deal and its objectives and its achievements, I doubt. And I'm afraid that also even the fact that there are European elections coming where these issues are again at stake, the knowledge, the understanding, the awareness is all too weak. I'm afraid that this is at least the polls that I have seen, or the newspaper stories, very little awareness. And those who are most aware happen to be the most, I would say, populistic. I mean, those parties are very well already aligned and have been able to, I guess, already encourage their voters to go and vote. Whereas, indeed, many other citizens groups, those who are more moderate or think that there's still indeed a reason to work on the environment and health topics, the green transition, may sleep on the voting day, unfortunately.
Interesting. I mean, yes, Saskia, you said in your intervention there, you talked about a U-turn in green policy, and I sometimes wonder if sometimes the Green Deal is so expansive and it's such a systemic change. Is it actually a message that's just very difficult to get across in a simple, coherent way to voters? And what are you hearing in your sort of pre-election campaign efforts?
Well, very good question, because in the current context of the farmers' protests, people believe, and farmers too, that the farm-to-fork strategy is in place. And actually, a big part of the Green Deal linked to agriculture and food systems is not in place at all. And so this is a real paradox, right? And we're trying to explain that. But in people's minds, citizens' mind and farmers' mind, there have been so many environmental regulations that it overburdens them and other sectors, and we see lobbyists are being very active in order to convince Commission governments to not regulate further and to have this pause, regulatory pause. But I truly think and agree with the colleagues here that there's a real lack of information. And not only information. In order for the people to be informed, they need to be associated, to participate in policy making, actually. And the Green Deal is a very good step forward. As I said, it was a surprise, actually, in 2019. I think it's also thanks to civil society and to citizens, and especially the youth, for climate mobilization that we got this Green Deal from the Commission and especially from Ursula von der Leyen. But it's still a pact coming from the EU institutions. And we need to work more with EU citizens. And when we see the outcome of the conference on the future of Europe, which can be criticized on the I would have liked a more participative process instead of an institutional process. But still, citizens participated. They issued recommendations. And if you have a look at the recommendations, they are fully aligned with what we are talking about today. They want ambitious EU policies when it comes to all the Green Deal related aspects. And so I think that having a more participatory approach in our daily work, be it at the parliamentary level, be it at the Commission level, is key in order to have the citizens on board.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it definitely feels like people want it, but are the right messages getting through? I mean, Yannis, you spoke in your intervention very eloquently about the consumption patterns and the need to change our consumption patterns. But I mean, isn't it a deeply unpopular thing to tell consumers that they can't consume? And how do we address that?
Basically, there are two things which you have to. The thing which you said, it's unpopular, but I will try to explain you how it could become also popular. So, there is, when you talk about sufficiency, when we talk in IRP about sufficiency, we talk about two kinds of sufficiency. And one is, of course, if you consume less, which is from the consumption side, but another is for the production side. You can provide human needs by using less resources and less energy. And currently the system is such that we are not incentivized about that. So we don't talk about changing mobility system. Predominantly we talk about car industry. So as long as you are in that kind of logic, of course, you are making mistakes in approach. But let me, if you would allow me, just also in the context of what you have said, my introduction was a bit sober, but it's only from one reason, because I have learned that there is an eternal kind of conceptual battle. What is better and what is best approach? Do we need to go with positive and blah blah? And in Commission, where I was quite a long time, this was dominating. But if we are sincere, people act based on fear. And the best example which we have was the last COVID. So when we have considered something seriously, we have acted. Indeed, governments have acted too little, too late, and when all the options were exhausted, but they acted. And were there enough financial means? Yeah. Were there a lot of new innovation power which we have put into vaccine story? Yeah. We were all surprised how it's possible that this happened in half of the year, which normally would take 3-4 years. So it's possible if you take it seriously. And is the system change possible? Would you be able to work from home if COVID would not happen? No, because COVID actually make it happen. And this is a typical system change, which we have. And if we are coming now to the question of human needs, which you asked at the beginning, ask yourself how many of the clothes you have actually wearing during the COVID comparing to the pre-COVID or post-COVID period. And then ask yourself a second question, were you more happy or less happy? So what you do when you come home? When I will come home, I will immediately put this down because it's uncomfortable. That's for sure. Yeah. Same for the shoes. And same for the shoes, yeah. So it's absolutely, so actually, and final conclusion, unfortunately, is that we are still not seeing those things seriously enough. Maybe if you would allow me just one example, because I think it's really, I'm really surprised that we don't get it where we are. Climate change. CO2 emissions on a global level were the highest 2023. We have reached in 2023 1.5 degrees Celsius, which we set all together to our goal, which we should not surpass. Do you hear anybody panicking? I don't. Is that part of, I don't know, debate for the next elections? I even don't hear it. We have reached the target which we should not exceed. The climate, the fossil fuel subsidies on a global level, which is for me the kind of hypocrisy indicator par excellence. They have topped $7 trillion, which is 7.1% of global GDP. Never before that figure was higher than 2022, which is the last figure which was given to us by IMF. So get ready, it will get worse. There is no indication that it will get better. Yeah, there are some indications in Europe, which basically you said that we are, but if we look to the global trend, it's not going right. And how to persuade the people? Just give them one summer like we have had in Slovenia. All the government is persuaded, and all the people know that we have to avoid climate change now. Just give them one summer like it was. Because we were facing extreme weather events on 2-3 days. And at the end, we ended with a flooding, which cost us enormous amount of money. And today we are discussing how to actually, where to get the money. But the real question behind is, everybody now, when people were hit, is full of solidarity. and rightly so, because when somebody is hit, you need to help them. But why the hell we are not ready to show that solidarity ex ante, and we are ready to show it only ex post, where somebody is suffering? The same amount of money or more will be paid ex post by the same people and by the same companies, and we don't get it.
Thanks, yes. Lina, I know you want to come in there, and then I want to bring Veronica in on.
Just to indeed, I mean, link this to the European climate risk assessment and the messages and also the Commission communication just then, I mean, on the next day, I mean, following that. I think we are trying to put this topic really forcefully on the agenda, and thanks also to the Belgian presidency. The climate adaptation, we have been too slow in preparing ourselves and preparing our societies for the new climate, which unfortunately seems to be already past, I mean, the 1.5, at least temporarily. Let's see whether the long term is the same. We have the El Niño at the same time. But anyway, I mean, we have to start planning for the and preparing ourselves, really building our infrastructure, our homes, our systems, preparing for the worse climate. And this will require also really financing, and preferably indeed ex ante, and not like when disasters happen. And this will really require a major investments. And of course, again here, the just transition, just resilience, I mean, is a key issue. So we have to ensure that those who cannot themselves afford, I mean, moving away from flood risk area or taking protections and precautions or insurances, can also equip themselves, I mean, for the future. So really critical. Whether it's enough talked, whether it's understood that this is at stake, maybe not. So maybe it would be different if the elections were in August, on a very hot day.
Well, it's true, I think in 2019 that the German floods had potentially some impact on the outcome. Veronica, on this point about, I'm glad you brought us onto the adaptation topic as well. What do you see as the most immediate action that member states need to take on the adaptation agenda? And also to this point Yannis makes about fear, does it take, you know, an extreme event to make us take action?
Yes, well, certainly also we have to realize that the world is much more fragile than before, and it is increasingly so year by year. So I would very much like to see also in the European debate the global context, that we are not living in isolation, whether it's a national context, subnational, national, European context. What happens on the other part of the world has direct impact in Europe. On adaptation, yes, we definitely are not there yet, and the financing for adaptation is, there's a huge gap. We need to mobilize across different sectors funding for adaptation. There are measures that, and very much linked to the nature response also, nature-based solutions, for example. There is a relatively quick fix for the issues, which is both responding to adaptation, but can be seen as economic opportunity, as I mentioned earlier on as well. I very much like, and we discussed it with Yannis before, the idea, Yannis, that you mentioned, the ex ante solidarity. I think that's also in terms of adaptation. We do need to build more resilient societies. We need better early warning systems. But the long-term planning is not there. We are always surprised then that another extreme event comes. There are much more frequent, much more intensive, and less predictable extreme events. And we haven't grasped that yet. We are late with the responses, and the adaptation needs to be incorporated in the holistic approach, not only measures that ministries of environment propose. It really has to go also to agriculture. We have mentioned agriculture a few times, but agriculture is one of the biggest users of water, for example, but is dependent on water also. So climate impacts on agriculture will have or already have devastating impacts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to bring us around onto the farming debate. That's definitely on the agenda. I just also, I mean, you mentioned nature-based solutions there and how they're, you know, they can be a quick fix. Minister, I just wondered, I mean, it feels remiss not to mention the nature restoration law in this panel. What are you doing to save that law?
We still don't know, to be frank. What we have done after the new Hungarian position that is blocking the dossier, what we have done is to win some time, to try to find a solution, to try to find a way. And we are really determined to do it for two main reasons. First, to save the law itself, because it's important to have a natural restoration law, even if the law is weaker than in the beginning. That's true, but anyway, we need it. And the second reason is that that's the job of a presidency, to find solutions and to obtain results, even if the results are not the position of the country that has the presidency. So we have to go to this direction. I have to say that the administration, the Belgian administration, the Belgian presidency administration is completely engaged in this option. So we really do our best. But we still don't know how to do because we still don't know why Hungary has changed its mind. That's mystery. Nobody knows exactly, even themselves. If you ask, if you listen, what they said on Monday, that makes no sense regarding the first position. So we have to work in those directions. That's one option. The other option is to the other countries, because this is an institutional crisis, in fact. At this stage of the process, normally, there is no discussion anymore. This is formal. The adoption, at this stage, the adoption from the country is just formal. No discussion. Everything is done, in fact. The negotiation is finished. And that was okay for all parties. So that's a problem in itself about the way the European Union can continue to work efficiently, because it happens now with an aware, but it can happen with another file later, another dossier later, in the economy, I don't know, on which kind of dossier. So we will do our best, and we have several options. I hope we will succeed.
I hope so too, very much so. Actually, interestingly, one of the reasons that the Hungarian minister mentioned when she was talking to the press was indeed the farmers. Janis, please.
Just to say one sentence, it's not consensus, sorry guys. So stop talking about Hungary because it's many countries which are behind. And yeah, they have changed it.
We add a qualified majority.
I know.
And we are very close too.
I know, but
we don't have any more. That's because of
I understand that from I absolutely understand from the presidency, and I think you are doing the best. But I think it's not fair that we would now 2 months mention Hungary if we have few countries which are in that position. So simple as that.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
That's another option, to see if other countries can change in the good direction.
Yeah, and we will see what happens, obviously, in coming weeks. I just mentioned Hungary because actually they mentioned the farmers, actually, which was for the reason for their change, which and I thought, I mean, that's probably the same across many member states. I mean, you were sitting chairing the Forum of the Future of Agriculture, I think. Tell us, why is it that Green Deal policies seem to falter so much when they meet the agricultural sector? What's the mismatch there? What's going on?
You should be present yesterday at the forum and you would hear it. It's interesting how people who are representing different interests actually have good reasons to explain, and how nicely they explain their interests. But it's pretty, I think a lot is on, where we are failing is we have not organized the agri-food transition well. So you need to fund the transition. And while for me, one of the core reasons, if I'm looking to, for example, to European Commission, what could it do differently in the future, and I was also proposing that yesterday, is if we look to a very good example which we have had in climate and energy, they put the climate and energy people in the same shoes. The climate people were forced to think how difficult it's energy, the energy transition. The energy people were forced to think, oh, climate, it's really a reality. And somehow we started to move in the right direction. That never happened in agriculture and environment, never. So common agriculture policy, it's the biggest funding instrument for environment. Was I clear? So it's not life. So it would need to be decided together, and it would need to be guided together. So there is an essential, it's always about governance. Whom you give the possibility to decide about the things in what interest. And if I would be asked, and I have proposed that at UNEA, all the governments, including European Commission, would need to nominate a minister for future generations. Because what is fundamentally missing in governments is somebody who is not taking care only for urgent matters, because there are everybody taking care, but for important matters, so that the important do not become urgent matters. But in agriculture, it's exactly that. We haven't organized. Farmers feel insecure, and they don't see a kind of solid future where they would feel comfortable and secure. And that's a serious question. And I think you cannot address it by simply pointing a figure on them or no. No, you need to create that kind of transition. And I was always saying that if the market is not providing them with enough solid future, and of course then you add these geopolitical things and so, which actually happened on the top of that, and trade implications and everything, if they don't have that feeling, and then you have to use the public money actually to secure their reality, you can't use the public money to actually do the change, because there it's as much as it is available. And if we want to use the public money really to fund the transition, we need to look first to the markets. And in the food chain, it's important that the biggest players in that food chain, which have market power, because farmers don't have market power, they have political power. But market power they don't have. And the others which are using that market power should a bit rethink how high profits are enough for them. Because at the end, farmers are pocketing in their pockets from what we are paying as consumers a very, very minor and lower part. And this will not end up well. So we need to look with sympathies to farmers, but at the other hand, I think we need to somehow have a really well-balanced view of what food system transition should mean.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. What really struck me actually going down to the farmers' protests yesterday, apart from nearly getting egged, was that a lot of them actually said, despite some political groups saying that they are the party of the farmers, they don't feel represented. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, what can the Greens do to reach out to farmers? I mean, it's probably not your natural constituency. And also, how do you what's your view of shaping the future CAP? As Jan has said, it's the biggest funding we have possibly for the environment.
Thank you. I think on the contrary, our natural basis should be the farmers, because farming and nature go hand in hand. But we probably are still not seen as their allies because of these environmental norms, and that are seen as constraints instead of, as you mentioned, accompanying measures in order to pay the farmers, remunerate their work, for the services they bring to nature, for the services they bring to ecosystems. That's why we need a fundamental reform of the CAP. That's why we're trying to show also why we voted against this CAP in 21. If you look at the reasons why we voted against, they are exactly the reasons why the farmers are in the streets today. And so this is what we have to show. To communicate better, probably, to go to enter into dialogue with the farmers. The problem is that they also feel represented. In Belgium, maybe less and less, but still feel represented by the main unions, Copa-Cogeca at EU level, FOI, FEANSA, etc. Not FEANSA, in France. FNSEA, thank you. Sorry for FEANSA. And so they still feel represented, but when you talk to them individually, that you explain them, but it's as usual when it comes to green matters, it's a nuanced approach, right? And how we can reform the system in order to answer the problems. And to show also that years of liberalization of right-wing policies actually in the agricultural sector have led to the disappearance of more than 40% of the small-scale farms in Europe. No country has a better experience. And so it's also showing that these policies that have been led for many years are responsible for the current situation. We've been talking about the lack of vision. We had a vision with the Green Deal. In 2019, the Green Deal was supposed to be the vision for not only the 5 years to come, but until 2050. But most of the political groups, most of the politicians, of my colleagues in the parliament, lack this sense of long-term and just look at the next elections. And so if they have somehow to defend what they think is their electorate, they will do, even though it's not answering the long-term needs, even though they have voted the climate emergency. And this is also about the coherence of policies. And coming very quickly back to the nature restoration law and the current situation and deadlock we are in, is a very good example of the challenges we will face in the next mandate and how to bring most of the EPP members towards the progressive part, to avoid alliances as it's currently the case between the EPP and the even more conservative ECR and ID members even. This is one of the challenges. I think that we have also towards them, and you, stakeholders, civil society, have to convince EPP members using their own views. I will give one example. The World Economic Forum showed that more than 50% of our economy is based on nature and the services given by nature. And so we have many arguments to bring to EPP in order to try to get them on board again of the next steps of the Green Deal. And politically, this is really a huge challenge, and we need you. We need the media, we need civil society, because we are like-minded. We can also work with progressive MEPs, like-minded MEPs, but still we have MEPs to convince, and I really much hope that also from the Commission side that all the administration and DGs of the Commission will really, you know, be there to implement, not only implement the legislation that has been voted under this term, but also keep the Green Deal objectives in mind and keep pushing in order to get the majority of the member states on board.
Thanks. I know a lot of you want to come in on this topic, so Lina, we'll go with you first and then the Minister.
As most of this room as well thought that the food system, I mean the agriculture reform is or whatever, however we call it, is really the most important thing also for the next term. I think it's really worth of spending some time on this and the farmers issue. They are indeed, I mean, facing so many challenges, and I mean thinking of the family farmers. Yes, I have heard also that their suicide rate is higher than, I mean, definitely higher than the average. So they are really struggling about their future, about how can they move their business, their farms to possibly to the next generation. Then there's the climate change, and they are of course the most vulnerable sector in the EU as well. I mean globally, we talk about really major food security issues if, I mean, the harvests are damaged by the changing climate. So how can they then see their future indeed in this kind of situation? Then is the EU enlargement, and the imports from Ukraine already seem to be part of the reasons for the protests. And of course, they seem to be really economically struggling, I mean, to get, because they get only a minute part of the actual, let's say, profit of the food industry and system. So I think it's really, I mean, already sort of late to reach out and have a dialogue with them, but we have to be able to do that. And of course, it is not only perhaps the Commission, it's not only perhaps the governments in their settings. We have to, of course, all in the whatever role we have, like we as an information, let's say, distributor, collector, and assessor, we need to try to also reach out to them to understand more what kind of information would help them to manage the crisis. But of course, they are somehow protected by this, let's say, fortress of common agriculture policy. Their structures are sort of isolated. And I'm looking also to Minister Maron, whether, for example, the adaptation topic is brought to the Agri Council, so that they would also seriously discuss what kind of impacts the climate already has on the future of agriculture. So that they also would be part of this discussion and dialogue. And yes, of course, ideally it should be happening together with all parties. And of course, consumers have also a voice. I mean, many of us who can afford to healthy food can also think that, yes, food is rather cheap still. I mean, we can afford wasting it. So something is wrong also there. But of course, there are also, families and people who cannot afford, healthy food. So again, the just transition elements are also entangled in this debate.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. Thank you. Minister, you wanted to...
Just two things. What do the farmers want? There are different one from the other. There are many different kind of farmers or food producers. But anyway, all of them, they want a fair income for their job. That's all. All of us, we agree with that. And from time to time, very often, they want less bureaucracy. But all the segments of the business sector, they want less bureaucracy. But anyway, we have to agree about that. We have to be conscious that from time to time, the bureaucracy is too heavy and it's not efficient. But they are not against nature, most of them. They know that they are very exposed to the climate change, for instance. They know that, and they know, most of them, they know they are part of the solution. So of course we have to be in dialogue all the time. And the good part with this protest is that we are, in fact, all the political parties are in dialogue with the farmers all the time. For instance, the Green Party is in dialogue, in such a dialogue that we know we have farmers in the list for the elections. And other parties too. We are not the only ones. And of course, they are a part of the solution, and they have to be the feeling to be heard. But also another elephant in the room, and Saskia knows very well the topic, the subject, is of course the trade agreements. If you want them to have a fair income, we have to think in a different way about those trade agreements with countries or parts of the world outside Europe. And not only thinking about Ukraine, but the other parts of the world, because the fooding system is a worldwide fooding system now. About Hungary, they say they will respect the NRL. They will. It is easy for them to reach the targets of the NRL because of the density of the countries and so on. In fact, they agree with them. Their point, it's not the farmers, of course, it's not. It's just to break the Green Deal dynamic. and to break the European Union dynamic. So that's why it's important to succeed in this fight, not only because of the annual objectives.
Yeah, excellent. Veronica, I know you wanted to comment on this point.
I know, just very quickly, because we hear the different stories, but what we should be hearing more are the positive stories from farmers, because there are lots of positive cases, especially from small and medium sizes farms that really put a lot of effort in nature-based solutions, and because they believe in it, but also because it makes sense not only ecologically but also economically. So we should include in the discussion these positive cases. On Lena's point, I think also there might have been missed opportunity when the biodiversity strategy and farm-to-fork strategy were launched to have discussions hand in hand throughout the process. On these, with ministries of environment and ministries of agriculture back to back, with the farmers, with the different representatives, but also just a quick reflection on the Green Deal as a whole. It is, and I do hope that will continue as being the transformative agenda. But in many countries, it's not understood as in the full scale, that we hear a lot about climate. Biodiversity is less so heard of now. It is, but not in the best context. But the pollution is, for example, very much missing. And it was interesting from the polls, also from the room here, and from the experts in the Barometer, that pollution is seen as at the very bottom, even from experts. And it is linked also to the nature. It is linked to the climate. So, but the Green Deal had the promise that it is the agenda that transforms the different systems, that it is a holistic approach. And somehow it didn't quite work out so holistically as we had hoped. But let's hope that with the next mandate there could be a little bit space for maneuver.
Yeah, very much hope so. Saskia, I know you wanted to make a quick...
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to add what you just said. Exactly. There are so many examples of the transition in the agricultural sector, food sector that are ongoing, and we have to lead by example and to really show it's working, reducing from 42% the use of pesticides and chemicals doesn't change anything in terms of productivity and income. This is important to show, and to show that the transition is already ongoing, and that the CAP needs to support this transition and to accompany all the farmers individually in their own transition. And then Minister m'a tendu la perche. Yes, indeed. I don't know how I could forget about the Mercosur, but talking about new, is it working? Yeah, about new alliances. I think there we have a new opportunity to build alliances with the farmers. Because we've been leading a campaign as Greens against the EU-Mercosur agreement for many social and environmental and climate-related dimensions. We've been working with the institutes, the IEEP, on this topic. And now we see that actually it's also a question here in the EU of level playing field and a concern for rightfully concerns for the farmers. And so I really much think that for different reasons we can make also new alliances in order to work that out, and that we have to change the trade model, the free trade agreements that are currently or approach towards trade internationally. We've seen all the limits. Also in the context of the Green Deal, that's what I meant by the international dimension of the Green Deal. And yeah, let's make it an opportunity and finish on a positive note.
Yeah, I think there's much more to be delved into on the international opportunity. Lena was just going to come in on that, and then the Minister, please.
I agree. There are really great individual examples, and maybe by advocating those and bringing them to this, press and attention, it's also one way to bring the positive narrative of the agri-food system change. But I wanted to comment also on the zero pollution part of the Green Deal, because indeed it seems to be a bit of, let's say, having been sacrificed, in the recent developments. But of course, we have been, seeing some progress especially the air pollution. I mean, the new limit values, they're still not yet at the WHO recommendations, but we are getting closer. And of course, I mean, as we all started with the discussion on how to bring the benefits of the Green Deal to the citizen, yes, the link to the air pollution or bathing waters, drinking water, I mean, these are really, I mean, important topics for the citizens, so hence they shouldn't be forgotten. And of course, I mean, let's say, hope that we get a global agreement on the plastic pollution, because this is also a very visible environmental issue, which has been coming on the top of the international agenda only, let's say, in the last 5 years. And we are not yet near to solving it. But it is, I think, important for the citizens. They see it. They don't want to have microplastics in their drinking water or in their food. So I hope that also these issues are carried forward to the next policy agenda, although the progress seems to be slower, or they are not gaining the same attention as the other environmental topics, biodiversity and climate change in particular. And then interesting, I mean, to Jannes, I mean, what about the resource use? I mean, what should Europe do on that?
We have a session afternoon.
I was about to say, we could be here all day, I think. Minister, I'll give you the last word before I turn to the floor.
Another thing that we can change, I think, to ensure that we can develop local and seasonal and quality food, because the people, they want quality food, and they like that. That's the public procurement rules, even at urban level. We have to change that to make it possible to encourage that we pay at a fair price good food, local good food, as local as possible, good food. And Europe can be an ally on that, and that's important to say too.
Great, thank you so much. Now, I'm sure there'll be probably plenty of questions in the room, and I know we'll have a microphone going around. So while you prepare yourselves, I'm just going to ask one from online. Who, not what, crucially, is the major threat to the EU Green Deal, and towards which forces must the agenda remain resilient? I don't know who would like to... Jannes, can I call on you?
There is no who, there is non-understanding where we are and where we would. So it's really putting these short-term priorities in front of the longer-term priorities. It's not about Green Deal actually. Green Deal is a kind of synonym of change behind, but I would not actually ask that question in that way. But it's just spreading the understanding what is necessary, what is useful, what is important for if we want to have what we want to have, a kind of socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable future. So I think it's no-brainer for me.
Let's do some more. If anyone would like to... Antoine, please. I don't know, is there a mic? Oh, yeah, maybe if you shout up and we'll sort the mic for the next one. Ah, voila. Thanks, Lena.
Thank you so much. Very quick questions to Minister Maron, the NRL. So many organizations around here today has produced some good material, has worked, has made the case for NRL. Can we help you? And if yes, how? Please tell us.
Lobby to the governments on all the countries, really. That could be powerful. Talk to the governments, even the local and regional ones, national ones. Talk to the press, talk to the other NGOs, create alliances.
Thank you.
There we go, there's your task. There's a question just in the fourth row back here. Oh, and there's a microphone at the back, so we'll pass to that in a minute.
Thank you very much. My name is Meryl Devescali. I work for BirdLife Europe. And I wanted to thank you for all the presentations. I wanted to go back to the CAP simplification, if you don't mind. Because from the NGO side, what we are observing, it's a processes that feels a lot anti-democratic. Why am I saying that? is because the Commission has proposed to open up the cap regulation and is trying to do this to speed up the process and do everything in 1 month without consulting the stakeholders. And in 1 month, they want to come to a new regulation where the current cap, the negotiations they last like 3.5 years, so 3.5 years. And this process is happening in such a fast, it's in fast processes, and we as stakeholders haven't been consulted on the proposal. So I wanted to ask you, how do you envision the democracy, the EU democracy, and how do you think this can in the future with the new Commission, with the new Parliament, how can this kind of processes be stopped? Because we think that they're not going in the right direction, even for the democracy at a certain point is at risk.
I can because it was the same question yesterday at the forum. Yeah. So there was a complaint from NGOs, exactly the same example as you shared, and there was a complaint from farmers' side that they were not consulted when European Green Deal was designed. So obviously, I think the institutions all are pretty much aware of the importance of getting stakeholders on board in the process. Because ownership, if you learn anything as a politician, is essential to get ownership in advance, because getting ownership ex post, even if people are on your side, if they were not consulted, they would not like to be anymore on your side. So ownership is critical for whatever. And there are mistakes happening, like explained one, where somebody wants to rush the things which can't be rushed. So I think in principle, it's absolutely necessary to create the ownership in advance. But just to mention one thing which I wanted to mention already before, it's in the context of this bureaucracy and approach which we have, which Alain, you have very nicely explained before, and it's a true problem. And I think it is a problem which member states and Commission should address in the future seriously. I can tell you my own experience because I was 10 years sitting there, and as a research commissioner, I wanted to do the simplification as much as possible because it's necessary, by the way. And we ended with simplification is simplification. That was my conclusion at the end. But there was one example, it's a nice anecdote if you want to hear it, it's super telling you where we basically are. I was basically asked in European Parliament immediately when I was very young commissioner still, what I think about timesheets for researchers, which is that researchers have to fill each hour which they spent on everything after we torture them with all the process, how to select them and where only minority is selected. My reaction was, of course, intuitional. I said, okay, I was living in a socialist, communist country, and at that time we were having timesheets, and I was always filling it at the end of the month because I knew what needs to be in, so it's a useless instrument. And unfortunately, it was a wrong committee. It was a committee for taking care for financial, and it didn't end up well. But I just want to say that this over bureaucratization which we have, it's a serious problem, and we have to deal with it.
Sure, which is done, by the way, at the member states level and not at the EU. But this cap simplification is not just about bureaucracy and administrative burden. It's also removing all the environmental requirements in order to get the cap money. So this is just...
That's wrong. That's simply wrong. So I was yesterday, anything which tries to please in that short term because of something which is the target currently elections, it's short-minded, wrong, and not helpful. And everybody knows that. But it's always this political game which is behind, which is then leading to that kind of solutions, which, again, it's totally wrong.
Saskia, do you want to comment, and then I'm going to...
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, this is unbelievable what is happening now, because usually the change, the reforms take many years, and they're supposed to be an impact assessment also of the proposal, and here in less than 1 month, we see the Commission acting in order to simplify the CAP, but only on the green measures, which means it's just serving a political agenda in line with all the previous episodes on nature restoration and withdrawal from SUR regulation, etc. And so this is also democratically speaking completely unacceptable, and the Parliament should react and say this is not a process that we want to caution and vote for. But politically, it would mean, and communication-wise, it would mean that we vote against the farmers again. This will be the political message that will be used if we vote against. So we are in a very tricky situation, because the signal that we as Greens, again, how can the Greens reconcile with the farmers? This will not help us to reconcile with the farmers if we vote against, but we'll never vote in favor. I mean, this is just not possible. And amongst the measures, nothing on the price, nothing on the revenue, on the income, nothing on the Mercosur that the Commission keeps negotiating. And this is also politically unbelievable, because the Commission could say, okay, we put the negotiations on hold, and it's part of a big package of discussions with the farmers, with all the farmers. There's a diversity of farmers, and again, around the table, you said that NGOs are not represented, but all the farmers are not represented. And that's also why they were yesterday in Brussels again protesting and saying that they don't feel represented. The good trade unions, farming unions in Belgium explicitly said that the problem is not the environmental measures, it's how they are being enforced and imposed to the farmers the problem. It's not the measures as such. And that the main expectations for them is the question of price, income, and trade agreements. And there we have absolutely nothing. And so, I mean, we see that politically it's possible to speed up reforms if there is a political will. And the Commission is abusing its powers to serve a political agenda, which is completely unacceptable. And we have to push that message through, also with you, I think, and to go back to the farmers, because in Belgium there have been measures at regional and federal level that try to cover all the demands from the farmers, but at EU level we see that the answer is far from being satisfactory, and we have to show why we cannot support this simplification as it stands. But I really fear today that there might be a majority in favor, just to show somehow to the farmers that political groups support them. And so we rely also, you were asking Antoine what you can do for the nature restoration law. You can do the same for the CAP reform. I mean, we need a strong review and structural review of the CAP, but with the stakeholders, with civil society, and with a strong impact assessment also on sustainability, and including the SDGs, and broadening it to the food systems, not only keeping agriculture, but we have to think about how we can change the food system inside the EU through the CAP. I think we have a basis with the farm-to-fork strategy. We have a basis for discussion, and we have to align the CAP on the farm-to-fork in order to make it work for the farmers. Help us.
Thanks. Yeah, and I recommend reading actually the consultation section of the Commission's CAP simplification proposal, because it's quite an interesting read. There's a gentleman at the back.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Marco Contiero from Greenpeace. I wanted to raise the same issue. This is a very nice poisonous gift prepared by Ursula von der Leyen and the EPP. It seems to be responding to what conventional farmers' unions want. In reality, it will only, in the medium and long term, affect their fields and the capacity to produce. But it's also a very negative political message that tells You know, people, if before the elections you go out and protest, you're going to get everything you want if you have political power. And farmers have political power, as Janet said. My question is more related to the governance problem. This situation is also due to the fact that within the council, it's agricultural ministers that take the decision. And that's what they decided yesterday. And so I'm questioning, how could environment ministers and the Environment Council and the Health Council step up and start also being part of a system that decides for society as a whole without leaving all the decision to one single sector? And in the Parliament, it's the same thing, because it's the Agriculture Committee that has decided to apply an urgent procedure and is now trying to deliver and then have a vote on the last plenary session. So how could the Parliament, also from a governance point of view, intervene and stop this madness? Because politically speaking, having an urgent procedure just to show and get some votes at the elections in June, when there is no such an urgency, and when there is no such a response to farmers, meaning literally looking at their economic situations, this should be stopped. We should all try to end this madness. Thanks.
Do you want to comment on the governance?
I actually already tried to address that question. So I think if you decide about your own money, it's a conflict of interest. So, and it's a problem, of course. And I think that's why I said that at the end, it's about the governance. And that's why I pointed to the example of energy and climate, because I think it's essential that you basically start to understand that it is that are joint questions, and they would need to have a joint ask and joint solutions, which when it comes to that. So it's difficult to imagine the changes there, but governance is the name of the game.
This is the name of the game. On that note, I'm so sorry, we are out of time. Hopefully the speakers might be available afterwards if you're quick enough to nab them. Thank you all so much for your input. It's been a really good debate. Thank you all so much for joining us and giving such good insights and sparking off lots of thoughts. I think we probably could have sat here much, much longer. I hope the rest of the day is very fruitful and lots of good discussions. And thanks to the IEEP for hosting.
Thank you very much again to all our speakers. I'll take just 1 minute before we can go to lunch. I'm Mattia Bonfanti, the IEP Head of Networks and Governance. I wanted to highlight very quickly the program for the rest of the day. We can enjoy lunch until 1:30, and then we will move to what we call Science for Policy session. This is very much in line with what we do as an institute, as a network of think tanks, and with our partners. Yes, you can see in the slide now the different sessions. There is a color code. The Science for Policy sessions are designed to get different views on the same topic from the key stakeholders that we think could contribute with us to get a better understanding of each topic and get better policy recommendations that we can then use all together for engagement with our different audiences. We will have in the auditorium, so same room where we are. First at 1:30 we will have agri-food, so the debate on reaching climate neutrality in agri-food. And at 3:30, same room, the Just Transition panel. The breakout room, so the other two parallel sessions, will be just up the stairs. You'll follow the science that we put there, and we will have the debate on adaptation and resilience in nature restoration plans. And at 3:30, the EU resource management law. We will close the date at about 5:10 We'll all convene here, get back in this room to hear again a follow-up of the debate that we had in the morning, still focusing on the Green Deal resilience for the next month and year. And then we hope to welcome you still for a networking cocktail with us at the end of the day. So please enjoy. I hope you can enjoy the discussion that we have now, and you're welcome with us at the networking lunch just in the room next to this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.